So we got a killer all around in Ohio.
Hello, I'm Bill Swafford, the host of the True Crime Podcast, Murderers in Ohio, right here on YouTube. If you haven't done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with everything. Right now, I want to talk about the George Wagner trial. I have spent the afternoon watching the opening statements by the prosecution and the defense team. The prosecution went first. The prosecution gave a 3-hour long opening statement. I myself kind of got the feeling that the prosecutor wasn't fully prepared to give the opening statement. She made quite a few mistakes, and she did go back and correct herself, though. The prosecutor basically laid out to the jury what they should be expecting once the trial really starts, as far as the witnesses and what they will be hearing, the evidence that they will be seeing. They will be hearing from the crime scene investigators and what the crime scene investigators found. The prosecutor even laid out the events of the day that the Rhoden family were found. She did say that Sheriff Reeder showed up on the crime scene around 9:30, and after a few hours, he called the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. The prosecutor said that they found 40 caliber shell casings at Chris Sr.'s residence and Kenneth Rhoden's residence, and they were fired from the same gun. And they found 22 caliber shell casings at Frankie and Dana's house. So those are the two guns that were used to shoot the Rhoden family. Prosecution also says that there was a third gun, which is a high-powered rifle that was used to shoot at Chris Rhoden at the door. They said there was a lot of blood at the crime scene, and that footprints were left in the blood. A couple of different shoe sizes, and shoe prints that went back to the shoes that Angela bought at Walmart before the murders. It is said that Jake once typed up a list of rules on how Sophia should be raised, and that these rules were given to Hannah and she must obey them. Sort of like Sophia had to be homeschooled and just different odd stuff, really controlling stuff. Jake Jake and George also made up custody papers. These custody papers said that in the event of Jake or George's death, their kids, Sophia and George's son, would go to Angela Wagner. This whole family dynamic is a little messed up. It's said that Angela once got mad at Jake when they was in Alaska. Jake had gotten remarried. Jake told Sophia that she could call his new wife Mom. That made Angela upset. And Angela said that George's son and Sophia basically think of each other as brother and sister, and they consider her to be Mom. So for Sophia to call Jake's new wife Mom, it would confuse them. So the family dynamic was a little messed up. During all of this, the expression on George Wagner's face did not change very much. You really couldn't tell what he was thinking. The prosecution talked about the time that the Wagners were coming back from Alaska. They were met at the border in Wyoming by the Ohio Bureau of Investigation. Law enforcement actually put a listening device in the Wagner's car. However, the Wagners outsmarted law enforcement. Billy told everyone not to talk about anything while in the car. And comes to find out that the Wagners were being tracked Their phones were being tracked. They had listening devices on them. And the Wagners would not talk about anything over the phone. They always went outside to talk about things. So the Wagners had a good idea that they were being listened to. They even put a listening device in Jake and George's work truck. And the prosecutor says that during the trial, we're going to get to hear some of these recorded conversations that the Wagners had without knowing that they were being recorded. Now, Angela Wagner has done pled guilty to what she says is her part in these murders. She has said that it was her initial ideal to get rid of Chris Rhoden Sr. She said that she wanted to narc him out for his marijuana and that he would get arrested, be taken away, and then it turned to they needed to murder Hannah. And the first and only target was supposed to be Hannah Rhoden. Angela Wagner said that she kept nagging Billy Wagner to do something about it. And that's when those two went to Jake. They went to Jake and they all started to form up a plan to murder Hannah. And their list of victims just kept growing until they finally took care of all of them. Angela said the reason why they done this is not because of custody. Angela said that the reason why they did this is because they feared that Sophia might be sexually abused. They said that Hannah might have been abused throughout her lifetime by someone in her family, and they thought that it could happen to Sophia. So that's far different than what the prosecution is saying, that it is all over custody. I still think that there's more an underlining thing for this. Billy Wagner did know that Chris Sr. was growing marijuana and selling it. And I'll tell you why. Because Jake said that they went to Chris Sr.'s house first. The way that they did that way Chris wouldn't be suspicious is that Billy made an arrangement to make some kind of a drug deal. So Billy Wagner, the Wagners, all knew of what Chris Rhoden was doing with marijuana. So let's get to what Jake Wagner is supposed to be testifying about when he finally does testify in his trial. Jake testified that George Wagner was there. George supposedly was carrying a gun, and that when they went to Chris Rhoden's house, that Jake and George were hiding underneath the truck, and George was supposed to take that first shot. But George hesitated, took too long, so Jake took the gun. Jake admitted to killing 5 people, and he says that Billy Wagner, the father, killed Chris Sr. and Gary Rhoden, and possibly Kenneth Rhoden. When the Wagners were at Dana's and Hannah's mobile home, Jake said that George Wagner was inside of the mobile home when the murders were going on, and that George was standing outside of Chris Jr.'s door just in case Chris had come out. And if Chris did come out, George was supposed to shoot him. So as of right now, as of what Jake's saying, George was there, but he did not pull the trigger on anyone. However, in part of Jake's statement, he did say that George did help with some of the planning for the murder, and that George did go out and buy some of the stuff that they needed for these murders. So therefore, he did play a part in all this. The defense team's opening statement was not as long as the prosecution's. Basically, what the defense team tried to do was distance George from the Wagner family. The lawyer tried to make it seem like George didn't even know that it happened. George was not there at all. He wants the jury to believe that Jake and Angela conned the state of Ohio to get lighter sentences. George's lawyer even said that the evidence will show that Jake committed all 8 murders by himself. And what I would ask is, why would Jake be trying to implicate Billy and George in all these murders if they weren't there? Because it won't lighten his sentence. He's still going to serve the rest of his life in prison. So why would he bring up his family if they weren't there? I would like to say this, that during the 3 hours that the prosecution gave their opening statement, they were not interrupted once. As soon as the defense team started giving their opening statement, the prosecution interrupted within the first 5 minutes. Once again, I would like to say I felt that the prosecution team was not quite prepared for the opening statements. George's lawyer wants the jury to focus on this fact. Well, actually, 5 facts, but I'm going to say this one fact. George had no motive. Jake had a motive. Angela had a motive. Possibly Billy. George had no motive. Now, Jake did say one thing that George did. While they were at Chris Sr.'s house, Jake had went back inside of the house to get something, keys out of pockets or something. He went into the room. When he come out, he noticed that Chris and Gary's body had been moved. He said that George helped Billy drag those bodies into a different room. So basically, that was some of my take of what I've watched today. I've learned a lot about this case, more details that I wish I would have knew earlier when I did the podcast. So I will be watching more. Please hit that subscribe button. I will keep everybody informed on what I've been seeing. Thank you.
We got the devil on the run and over.